Hello and welcome everyone to this week's episode of the podcast. This week is all about the wonderful world of sand casting. We love sand casting here at Jewelers Academy, and it's really had a resurgence recently. It's very popular. The in-person courses at Brighton are very popular, and for the longest time, people have been asking us to do an online course. And lo and behold, we reveal the online course in sand casting for jewelers by the wonderful Iain Sainsbury. So I am joined by Iain today, and we're going to be sharing Iain's top tips for how you can do sandcasting at home. And I'm also going to share a little bit about his brilliant new online course, which was out just a couple of days ago. It is on offer at the moment on a pre-sale, which is a massive 50% off. So if you're thinking about getting it, now is going to be the best time. That offer ends on the 6th of November. So, yeah, check it out. We'll put the link in the show notes. But for now, we're going to get into talking about sandcasting and really demystifying how you can do it at home because it can be a little bit scary because there's a torch and there's flames. So, welcome, Iain. Thanks for coming and sharing about the
I did.
torch today.
Hi there.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
To begin with, maybe you could just share, just for anyone who hasn't heard of sandcasting before, what it is and why people might potentially have a bit of fear about doing it from home, and then we'll move into why they don't need to and how we can help solve that.
So sandcasting is probably one of the earliest forms of metal forming that we have. It's something that's been around for thousands of years. So when you heat metal up, you pour it into a mold, you create something. You go back, you look into the archaeology, and there's stuff that goes back thousands of years. Some of the earliest pieces they think were sandcast because it's a relatively simple way of making something from a metal. um, it's obviously requires heat. And so that's one of those things. It tends to be, see, people see it as a barrier to doing it because you have to get metal hot enough that it's actually liquid. And that's something that scares quite a lot of people. But it allows you to create some amazing pieces, and from the comfort of your own home as possible. So it is one of those things that it's sort of like everything in jewelry, it ebbs and flows in popularity. But at the moment, there's a lot of interest in it and a lot of resurgence in it because it is something that has got a sort of a relatively low bar of entry, in the fact that you can do it in your own workshop, and you can create some amazing results from it. So it's a technique I use extensively in my work. Um, I love it. I love being able to create everything in my own workshop rather than sending things off to be cast. I see a huge advantage in it personally.
Mm,
Um, because
absolutely.
then I can create and get everything done in house.
Yes. Well, I can relate to that because I love wax carving and I do send most of my stuff off to a caster, but I am very impatient. I'm often like, okay, it's been a week, it's been 2 weeks, when is it coming back? So the great thing about sand casting is, like you said, if you need something for tomorrow or the day after, you're like, right, I've got this covered. And I think also what I love about it is it's got this kind of, it doesn't have to, but it really lends itself to this more rusticy kind of look and feel
Mm.
where you can get the real sort of natural elements from the sand, and it looks beautiful, and it would be really hard to get that in a different method. So it kind of has its own texture, almost its own, and of course you can sand and refine those bits and make perfectly polished finished pieces. But I also love seeing sandcast work where you've got the roughage of the sand, and I know that you bring both of those into your work, don't you, Iain?
Absolutely, and I think one of the key things, and you hit on it, is that it has its own texture. And one of the reasons behind that is that every single piece you create using sandcasting is different. And you can't create exactly the same thing endlessly because it's not using the same mold. So every time you create a mold in the sand, it's a brand new one, and it has that uniqueness that you only get through creating something once and then doing it again. Yes, you can use different models to create various different pieces in a similar way, but you'll always have that kind of texture and that roughness. And yeah, you can sand things back, you can refine them, and you can also enhance that roughness, that texture, to create different patterns, and I use that quite a lot in my work.
Yeah, like sprinkling in some extra thick sand.
Indeed,
Oh,
yes.
yeah, which you talk about in the course, which is really exciting as well. So, okay, so we know we love sandcasting, and hopefully you guys will have seen, if you're listening to the Jewelers Academy podcast, you're probably a jewelry enthusiast. You've probably seen some videos online of people melting stuff. But I know for a lot of the jewelers I speak to, they'd love to do sandcasting, but it's just the kind of like, how do I do it actually at home and not burn down my whole house? So we are going to be talking about that today. And like you said, it does need a certain amount of heat, and it's a little bit of a sometimes it feels a bit like a science experiment. You're like putting in a bit of this and a bit of that, and you want to make sure you get them roughly right to come out with the right result. So we've got some top tips for sandcasting at home. So what is your first tip, Ian?
So I think that one of the key things to think about before you do anything else is think about the sort of the safety at home. Because obviously, if you're working from a studio in your house, or in your garden shed, which is made of wood, obviously there's a bit of concern when you've got lots of heat going on. So first things first is you need some way, if everything goes horribly wrong, of stopping said fire. Fire extinguisher and blanket, safety blanket, are the best two things. I've always got a fire extinguisher within hand's reach. There's always a fire blanket, and you can see it behind me. There's always a fire blanket in reach as well. And normally I'll have various containers of water around, which I use for quenching. So if needs be, if something happens, you've got ways of putting fire out. That's number one. Number two is you've got to think about yourself, and what you're wearing. So no open-toed shoes. That's always a bad one, because when metal is liquid, it isn't going to stop with your skin. Okay, so you've got to make sure you're wearing nice, thick shoes. And accidents do happen. Wear an apron. Wear something which can cover you, so that if there's any little sort of sparks or anything, you're not going to get holes in your clothes. And just deal with it with a degree of respect, because when you're dealing with casting, you're dealing with metal that is over 1,000 degrees. So you're talking about something that's really quite warm. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to um, be sort of throwing it around. On the other side, you don't want to be too cautious, because then things don't work properly. But it's a lot of it comes down to experience and having a little bit of confidence. Now, a lot of us will have melted things down to create ingots. And sometimes that's a good way to start, to get a little bit of experience in what sort of temperatures are required to heat things up. When you're casting, you go a bit hotter, for longer. And so it's one of those things you've got to think about, the environment that you're working in. The other thing you've got to think about is ventilation. So all of the ways which we heat up, probably with the exception of things like electric furnaces, produce gases. So you need to have ventilation, either mechanical ventilation like fans, which extract the air, or do it outside if you can do it outside, or do it with the window open. So you need ventilation, you need extraction, you need some degree of protection. If you're not like me and wear glasses, some eye protection is normally a good thing. Um, what I wouldn't say, unless you absolutely feel you have to, is wear big, thick gloves. The reason being is that you lose dexterity, and that's never a good thing. You can use them for picking things up which are hot, but when you're actually casting, it's good to be able to use your hands properly.
Yeah.
So don't be too worried. Um, so I think that's the key to top tips for thinking about it when you're working. The other thing, is how you actually an area you work within, and I think this is something that is really important. So in my workshop, I've got one side of my workshop is basically where I construct pieces. I have a bench peg and everything else. The other side of my workshop is where I do all my casting. And the reason I've got them separate is that um, the casting area, I have a setup box which has got a couple of big blocks of ceramic in there, so that you create this sort of like little enclosed oven that you can heat things up in. And it means that you can heat things up faster, and they are contained within that area. Now, if you're using a casting box, which is a sort of solder boards on the bottom and at the back and at the sides, everything's contained within that, and it's relatively safe because everything's within a heat-proof box,
Mm.
and that means that you can cast on a bench top. So that's something to look at. There's lots of guides of how you do these things online, But it's certainly something to bear in mind, especially if you're struggling a wee bit with heat.
Absolutely. And on the course, you do guide us through the exact setup that we can use, which is great. And I think, just to summarize what you said, because it's that balance, isn't it, with health and safety? Like we want to be
Yes.
safe, but we also don't want to be so safe in inverted commas that we're petrified to do anything, which I think can happen a lot. There's someone I was speaking to the other day said they bought a kiln and they haven't used it for a year because they don't know how to do it and they're terrified of burning the house down. So it's that balance. But I think in summary, so if you're at home and you're making pieces at home, the fire blanket is definitely it's good
Yeah.
to have, and the fire extinguisher. You probably won't use it. That's the other thing. Like,
Yes.
we have all the fire equipment at the jewelry school, and we never used it, in like a decade with thousands of students coming through. I mean, we could, and there were times when like someone pointed a torch at the wall and we're like, the wall's kind of gone a bit black now. Could you not point it at the wall? But actually, my experience of setting things on fire is it's usually when something's left unattended and it's something very benign like a toaster, because you think that's not an issue, I don't need to pay any attention, and that's where most fires come from. Whereas when we're doing something like sandcasting, we're literally watching it the whole time, we've got our attention on it, so actually the risk is a lot lower with these more intense kind of activities, because our brains are switched on and we're like, okay, fire, better watch that. So making sure we've got the fire extinguisher, the fire blanket, like you said, the apron, maybe some glasses if you want to protect your eyes, hair tied back, shoes on, lots of common sense stuff, and then crack the window open and you're sort of good to go. We'll move on to talking about the area as well in a little bit. But you also mentioned that you could do it outside, and I've seen quite a few people online that do it outside. I feel like they're in hotter climates than we are.
Yeah. Yes.
Because that's the tricky part about doing it outside, isn't it? Is you need the heat.
And
Yeah.
and this is, yeah. I mean, I've seen online videos of people doing things outside. You can do it outside in the summer. You can do it more easily, but it is one of those things. If you're going to do it outside, you need to have like a little enclosed space you're heating up in, because it you need the temperature to be high. And you're always fighting a temperature gradient when you're casting anything. Um, what you will find is that whatever you do, if you're in an enclosed room, it will gradually get hotter. So don't do what I did last year and decide to do some casting when it was over 35 degrees in the workshop. It gets a bit warm. But it is one of those things. If you can do it with some ventilation or outside, even then it's fine. Um, and it is. I mean, I've seen people casting on beaches and all sorts. You can do it. It's just a bit more tricky.
Yes. It's all possible, but
It's
might
all
be
possible.
more experimenting. Okay, brilliant. Which brings us on really nicely to the second tip, which is around heat and torches. So tell us a bit about how we can get a torch that has enough heat.
Absolutely. So heat is obviously critical to melting metal. But when you're working as a hobby jeweler, or as a jeweler as you're gradually developing, you normally encounter butane torches, these little sort of butane torches which you can use for soldering. Even the big versions of these butane torches, they only produce a certain amount of heat. They're not sufficient for doing something like this. Um, they're very good for heating up some small amounts to melt to form ingots, but you have to maintain a certain degree of heat when you're melting metal for casting. Um, so really, your sort of entry level that you can go to is something like a map gas torch, so a plumber's torch. These come in a whole wide variety of types, etc. The bottom line is you need to get something which will work with the yellow canisters, the map gas canisters. I don't know what these are in other countries, but certainly in the UK, they're classed as map gas. And they're normally fairly freely available in plumbers' shops. Um, and with those, you can get a variety of different handsets. What you really ideally need, if you can find it, is one with a hose, because holding this great big canister of gas with a burner attachment at the end gets really tiresome after a while. So if you can find one with a hose, there are kits available in certain online retailers and all sorts. But it's one of those things that um, that's your entry point, is really map gas with a torch. The flame size doesn't really matter because it's all about the amount of BTUs you're putting out. So it's the amount of heat you're actually projecting from the end.
Okay, great.
Um,
That's the entry level, like,
that's your entry level.
go. We don't want to invest too much, but we need enough heat.
Yeah,
And you're right. I think it's so important to share that you did that the general sort of jewelry making torches that we'll be using will not be enough because
yeah.
it's very frustrating when you try and do it with one of those
A
because you just
absolutely, and
from
one of the things that's really frustrating about it is that, and this is how you generally know if your torch isn't hot enough, you'll melt one little bit of the piece that you're trying to heat up, and then you'll sit there thinking, "Why is the rest of it not heating up? I've melted that bit, it should all melt." It just won't, because you don't have enough heat going into it, and that's why the MAP gas ones are quite good because, used in plumbing, they're used on big copper tubes, and as a result, they've got some quite big bushy flames, which actually allow you to cover quite a large area. Um, that's sort of the reason I say it's entry level is it's good. There are some downsides to it. The canisters are quite expensive if you use them a lot of them, and also they produce slightly more in the way of gases than sort of just propane. So it's one of those things to think about. Um, I mean, your next level, and which I use, you'll see used in the films, and a lot of people use is a propane torch with oxygen. So I use a Smith's Little in my workshop, and you'll see on the films as well. If you watch them, you'll see the Smith's Little being used there. It is a brilliant all-round torch. You can get a wide variety of different size tips for it. You'll see big sort of like rosebud tip ones. They're great. I don't use one myself. I use a number 7 size tip if you're interested. But it's one of those things that the benefit of an oxygen propane mix is you get a hotter flame and you can change how much oxygen's in it, which is important when you're doing the casting because you don't want to oxidize all your metal. And there's ways around avoiding it, and I mentioned that in the course. But it's one of those things that it gives you a nice hot flame. Now that's important if you're doing gold instead of silver, because gold's got a slightly higher melting point. Um, and so you've got one of those things that it's producing enough energy, it's producing enough heat, and it will work quickly. Um, a Smith's Little torch will always melt things faster than a MAP gas torch.
mm,
And you also end up heating less of the room because it's more directed.
yes.
So it's a bit more pleasant.
Yeah, and jewelers love Smith's Little torches.
Oh, they're brilliant.
It's a great excuse to have to get one. I have to get one for my sand casting journey I'm going on. So yeah, I think if you try the MAP gas first, you know, if you're brand new to this and you love it, then it's a great next step. It is a bit more of an investment, but it's not
Yeah.
just sand casting, is it? For stone setting and all sorts of intricate pieces, pretty much
It,
everything. Once you've got
it,
one.
yeah. Once you've got one, you sit there going, "How on earth did I ever get around without using this before?" I mean, I've got a hydrogen torch. I've got butane torches. I nearly all the ways use a Smith's Little torch just purely because it's so versatile.
Mm.
Just always remember it's gas on, oxygen off, gas off. You have to
There
make
we
sure you
go.
get it right.
Pro tip.
Pro tip: don't do it the other way around, or everything's a bit messy.
Yeah.
But no, it is one of those things that they are without doubt the best torches for this because it gets everything nice and hot. It melts quickly. You don't risk oxidizing things, and as a result, you end up with nice pores.
Mm. The other thing that we've used at Brighton, because we have the Smith's Little torch, which we use, we don't have the MAP gas torch, but we've also used the propane, just the
The
gas.
Thievet, yeah,
Yes, that's it, the Sieverts. Not as good, but a good in between
yeah.
because it's around £100 investment versus maybe £500 investment. And they do work. They do. So that's another kind of option to throw in there.
They do, and I mean it's one of the workshops I do some work at here has exactly the same setup. And if you don't want to have an oxygen concentrator or an oxygen tank, it's a great halfway house. The only thing I would say is that obviously because you don't have that additional oxygen input, it does take longer to heat up because it doesn't produce as much energy. But they are good, and if you have one already, don't change, use it. Um, but just beware, don't go too big with the crucible. Keep it nice and small because you'll just end up heating a lot of crucible, and it makes it much harder if you're just using a sieve.
Absolutely. Lots of options there. Awesome. Thank you, Ian. Which brings us on to number three, which we've already talked about a bit, but this is the idea of sort of creating your area, creating a furnace. So we definitely noticed in the in-person courses, the smaller we could get this area and the more kind of surrounded we could cover the pieces with blocks and fire bricks to keep it really concentrated, the better the metal would flow. Talk to us a bit more about this and
Absolutely. So, what in when you if you when you watch the videos, um, y- quite a lot of the time we're doing things we didn't have this sort of setup used to be just so it could be filmed. But what I have at my home workshop here, and I've used before in other places, is very much an enclosed space. And the reason behind this is what you're trying to do is get as much heat into the metal as fast as possible, so that you don't risk oxidizing anything. And with silver, you'll oxidize the copper first. So you want to get heat into it, which means you want to have as little cooling effect from outside. So what I built, and this is because I used to do all of my casting and everything in front of me on my bench peg, just beyond my bench peg. So everything was in one bench. And I bought a lot of solder boards, and if you get solder boards, they contain the heat, which is great. So you can attach some use a little sort of wooden frame on the outside, which allows you to have a sort of an enclosed area of solder boards. Number one, so you've now got an area which is flame proof, fireproof, and absorbs some heat or keeps some heat in. The best thing to do then is to either use you can use bricks, household bricks. They work quite well. They don't absorb too much heat. I've got sort of an old part of an old oven. So I've got these ceramic bricks. I mean, it's one of those things. What you really want is you want oven ceramic bricks, or sort of pieces from sort of ceramic barbecue, something like that, or even old soldering blocks. And what you want to do is create a little cubby hole for you to actually heat everything up in. And it doesn't need to be more than sort of about sort of 4 or 5 inches long and wide, just enough so you've got your crucible sitting in your whip, and you've got the heat directed onto it. And the smaller you can make that, the hotter it's going to get in there, and the faster you'll heat the metal up. And it doesn't have to look pretty. It'll look black and sooty fairly quickly. But what you need something that will just retain and reflect that heat in. So that will make your life so much easier. Because what you need to do is you need to get your metal nice and hot. And we talk about this in the films and how long you have to count for. But it's one of those things, just getting it nice and hot so it's running around like a fluid. That's how you get your cast looking nice on a repeatable basis.
So important. And I think it seems obvious when you say it, but when you don't know this stuff, you can spend days, weeks, months experimenting, being like, why is it not working? So such useful info. Brilliant. That brings us on to number four, which is all about preparing. So tell us, so we've talked about the area and the torch and all of that, but in terms of the actual molds that you're making, what is important here if you want to get a successful sandcast from home?
So then probably one of the most important things is think about the metal you're pouring and what's going to happen with it. Um, you have to think of it as a fluid. Don't think of it as metal because it isn't when you've heated it up. And part of that is down to what you're pouring it into, which is your mold. And mold preparation is probably the single thing that will make your life easier and simpler, because you've got to think about where the metal is going to go and where all the gas that you've just forced away from your mold is going to go as well. Because I mean, you can see this even with something like cuttlefish casting, which is meant to be porous. The gas is meant to escape through the cuttlefish. You still need to put air holes in sometimes because the gas wants to escape quickly. And that's the key thing, is you want the metal to take the place of the void, the gas, as fast as possible. And as a result, what you need to do is create little air holes so that you've got the gas escaping. But then you need to look at the mold when you've done all of that and make sure there's no little free bits of sand. Because if there are free bits of sand, they can act like little sort of little boulders that sort of get block up all the air holes. They move in the metal. And as a result, you can end up with incomplete pores here or there. And sometimes it just happens that way. Casting is never an exact science, not sand casting. I mean, lost wax casting in big casting houses, they are computer controlled and they're incredibly accurate. When you're doing sand casting, there's always that degree of has it worked, hasn't it worked? 90% of the time, it should work. It's just you just have to think about where is everything going to go. The other thing is where are you going to place something within your flask, your flask, because some people always think if you put it closer to the top, then the liquid's going to be hotter, and it will just fall down into. And it's not. That's not the case. What you want is you want the metal to be flowing like water into your mold. So you want a little bit of a drop. So I always place things at the bottom of the casting rings, just so that everything is flowing nice and smoothly when it hits the mold and flows around. And that's the way you've got to think about it. You've got to think about where do you put something in there? Where do you put the vent holes? Um, do you have any stones in there? Are they going to need vents behind them? All these kind of things. So preparation is probably the one thing that improves repeatability and successfulness more than anything else.
Absolutely. And this is something you cover in detail in the course. A
Mm,
lot of the course content is on the preparation of the molds for rings, for cast in place stone items, for 3D items as well. And they're all slightly different. And it
mm.
was really interesting for me watching the filming to see how exactly how you did it. And yeah, and what works. And like you said, a lot of the time it works. Sometimes it doesn't. And that's
It doesn't.
part of well, isn't it? I think you have to accept when you're doing a process like this that there will be times when it doesn't quite go to plan and you need to start again and you're experimenting and yeah, but definitely you can see that it's a real art in the preparation. But I think that's part of the fun of it as well.
Mm, completely agree.
Brilliant. Which kind of brings us on to our final tips, which we've kind of put, well, we've kind of covered one, which is about thinking about how the metal flows. And I love how you share about like it's like water. And yeah, it's hard sometimes for us to get our head around that because you think, but it's metal and even molten metal is a bit different. But when you think about, yeah, I think you were sharing before, if there's a tiny little gap at the top for it to get through it, and there's a bit of sand in the way, it's just not going to flow. It's going to get
Yeah,
stuck. So starting with the larger a larger kind of funnel to come in is helpful as well. But I think people will see it more in the when you actually look at the course and see the videos and all the things that go along with it. And I think our final tip was around just having fun and experiment.
absolutely. It is one of the things. It's one of the few things you can do in jewelry where every now and then you don't know exactly what you're going to get. It is fun. It's exploration. Um, I mean, you'll see some various different things I've cast when I've been working on putting together the films, and um, it is one of those things you can pretty much cast anything you want. It just takes a bit of thinking, a bit of preparation. You'll see some little Lego figures in there in some of the photographs, and it's you look at it and you go, how on earth do you create something that's three-dimensional that that is in that's created in that mold that way? You just have to be slightly ingenious in the way that you put a sprue in or you put an air vent in and just play. Because ultimately, that this is one of the few times you can get your hands into a load of sandy clay, you can mold it into a shape, you can create a little hole in that shape, and you can pour metal in and see what comes out, and you can create some of the most amazing things doing it. So
Mhm.
it is an opportunity to have fun and play with it, and just don't be too worried about the liquid metal. Bit of confidence, and also just a little bit of experience just doing it. Start small, make small things, get bigger. Don't go for huge things first off because you will really struggle.
Yeah, and definitely take the course and watch it and take on all the info there. But I also recommend watching the Handmade Jewelers series we did with Ian a year or so ago. And we'll put a link to that as well in probably inside the course or in the show notes. Because we get to see inside Ian's workshop and his exact setup. So it kind of gives a different angle as well. And I have a go and I get it wrong, which is great because you
I
can
remember that.
kind of how the journey goes and but it was great fun and then you learn and then you develop and next time it's a little bit better. So yes, well Ian, thank you so much for coming and sharing some of your wisdom today. I know people are going to absolutely love this course. I know people on the team who've been writing the notes and stuff are like, this is an amazing one. It's really in depth. There's lots of videos, lots of information covering lots of different areas. And yeah, just go check it out, go and enjoy. And Ian, if people want to connect with you and they haven't already, where is the best place they can find you online?
come and find me either at my website, iansainsbury.com, or Instagram. And that's Ian's, two eyes, Ian's underscore jewelry.
Brilliant. Awesome. And we can't wait to see what you guys make with this course. So make sure you come and share it over on Instagram with both Iain and with Jewelers Academy. We would love to share your progress and your successes and, things that don't go to plan as well. We can all help each other on this journey. It's a good time of year for sandcasting, I feel like, because it'll keep us cozy in the winter months. So yeah, I'm excited to see what everyone does with it and look forward to seeing you guys on the course soon. So thanks again, Iain. Take care, everyone. Have a good week. Bye for now.